So many of you have asked me, hey Michael, can you make a video explaining some of the mistakes that you made in the Spanish and during your Spanish journey, or some of the things that you would have done differently had, knowing what you know now. And so my intent with this video is to give you all at least, I think I have maybe 8, but to give you at least 5 things that I did wrong, 5 mistakes that I made in the Spanish learning journey, in the hopes that you all don't make those mistakes. And so here's this video. As always, I'm just taking ideas from you all. Hopefully, as always I say this, hopefully this helps. So mistake numero uno, the first mistake that I made that I regret 100% when it comes to me learning Spanish, is that I did not start out learning Spanish with the alphabet. Que tonto soy. How stupid is that, right? To learn the language and not know the foundation or the building blocks of a language, which would be the alphabet. But I didn't make that mistake. I did make that mistake. I was super excited and super ready to start learning words and all that I found the alphabet boring. I felt like, well, I took Spanish in high school, I kind of remember it, but I mistakenly did that, because what learning the alphabet did for me after I started, which I should have done this before, but what it did is it helped me be able to pronounce words that I was finding in my readings, and it just helps you understand the phonetics of the language. And so I'd recommend to you all that you learn the alphabet first. It's something that could be done in a day and a half. Really, I learned it in a day. I just went to YouTube and found an alphabet song in Spanish. And I would add that to number 1, the first point. Anything that's super basic in the language, I would just go on YouTube and find a song. I remember the alphabet right now because of the alphabet song. A, B, C, D, E, F, A, like that, right? So I'd recommend first you learn the alphabet. I made that mistake, huge mistake. And again, I would not recommend that to you all. Please don't make that mistake. Just learn the alphabet. Okay, the second major mistake that I made when through this entire Spanish learning journey is focusing on grammatical structures and the names of grammatical structures and the specific rules for grammatical structures. Right now, to this day, I cannot tell you what a indirect object pronoun is, or I can tell you what the subjunctive is and all this stuff, but all these little grammatical structures and rules and all this stuff, I spent a lot of time watching videos and doing exercises where they were emphasizing this is the indirect object pronoun and the rules work like this. I just felt like, right now in retrospect, I feel like focusing on those names and all that, again, if we take this from bare bones, right? When a child is learning Spanish, when a child is learning English, no one's telling them about the subject and predicate. For those native English speakers here, in school, we get introduced to the subject and predicate of a sentence, which most of us as adults probably can't even describe what that is. We get introduced to that after we've been speaking English for almost 12, 13 years. So my point is, the names of these grammatical structures and spending time trying to memorize, okay, this is the indirect object pronoun and this rule works in this case. Just I would recommend to myself to just get a feel for the language. Do the exercises, but ignore the names of the grammatical structures and the rules that accompany these different names, because they don't really help in the long run. That's really it. With that point, I know I'm kind of cutting myself off there, but I just don't think spending a lot of time on memorizing this is a grammatical structure that has this specific rule, I wouldn't learn it that way. I would just go back now, knowing what I know now. I just go through those exercises knowing that if I want to say I'm going to give it to him, I would say le voy a dar, because le means him in that context. I would try to learn the equivalents in English and Spanish versus just going off of the grammatical structures and grammatical rules that they try to teach us in these formal classes and courses and lessons. The third major mistake that I made in learning Spanish is it's really me not trying to make mistakes when I first started speaking with my language partners and my tutors. So I remember what I would do, and I have again, Sharon, if you're watching this video, I appreciate you, I really do, because Sharon and Juan, I appreciate you all, because early on in the Spanish learning journey, what I would do is if I didn't know how to say something, or I felt like I was going to sound stupid, I wouldn't even try to say something. Like if I wanted to say something in the past tense that I didn't know how to say, I would just try to say it in an easier way. Or for example, I would always use estoy haciendo algo, or I would use a specific verb because I didn't know how to say another verb. Okay, and I know that's pretty vague there, but my point is I used to try to evade making mistakes, and that is one of the dumbest things that you can do, in my opinion. I realize with retrospect now that that was foolish, And it was foolish because I've learned the most. I've had the best, the most productive, the most fruitful Spanish lessons when I'm making mistakes and I'm being corrected, okay? Like almost anything that I remember profoundly, that I really remember from you know, anything in Spanish that I really remember, typically it came and even now comes from me saying something or me trying to say something, even if it's incorrect. It comes from me trying to say something and then someone correcting me saying, nope, we don't say it like that, we say it like this. Or somebody saying, I get why you're saying that, but we say it like this. Or someone, and again, when I say someone, these are normally my tutors, telling me, I see why you would say that. In English, that makes sense, but in Spanish, we say it like this. So again, the biggest mistake here for me was not trying to say things or holding my tongue when I thought I was gonna say something incorrectly. Just not trying. You know, the figure of speech that you miss, all of the shots that you don't take, that applies in Spanish also. I wish I would have tried to say different things a lot earlier, and I would have learned a lot. I would have learned different things a lot earlier if I had tried to make those mistakes. If I just tried to say something, like if I wanted to say, I realized in past tense, but I don't know the past tense of dar, I would have just tried. Like now I know it's me di cuenta, but I would have just tried to say it in past tense and had someone correct me, okay? So saying things incorrectly that I know would be incorrect on purpose just to try to express myself, that would be what I would change, and that's the mistake that I made. I did not do that early on in the journey. The fourth mistake that I made in this entire Spanish journey is trying to speak too early. I've touched on this before in other videos, but I tried to start speaking Spanish in terms of having full conversations after about month 2, early on in month 3, and I just was not ready, okay? So I'm not a fan of people that say you should wait 5, 6 months, 8 months until you really have a grasp on the language before you start speaking. But I'm not on the other extreme either, where there are other people that say you should start speaking from day one. Number one, it's annoying because you can't express yourself and it frustrates you. And part of the process of learning Spanish is maintaining your confidence and your desire to quit, really, to stop yourself from quitting. And so that's one reason why I would say that I should not have started speaking much as early as I did, because I couldn't communicate. The second reason why speaking too early to me is a mistake is because it's a waste of time. You all know I'm all about time efficiency. I love making these videos, I love learning Spanish, but I have a life outside of Spanish and outside of these videos and all that kind of stuff that's very muy agotador. It's very demanding. And so with that, spending an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a week speaking when it's not being fruitful, and the reason it's not being fruitful is because you don't have an adequate vocabulary, you don't have adequate listening skills, you don't understand what someone's saying to you. That is taking an hour, possibly 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how many hours you're speaking per week. That's taking away from time that you could be using, that could be used more efficiently in terms of actually studying and practicing writing sentences, constructing sentences. And so I would say speaking too early was one of the mistakes that I made. I wasn't ready. It didn't help me early on speaking like that. The only help that it gave to me was the fact that it helped me realize that I wasn't prepared, and that it forced me to start listening a little bit more. So from that perspective, I guess it was helpful, but outside of that, speaking too early was a big mistake for me, and that's something that I can share with you all. The fifth and final mistake that I made, I really have more than 5, but the 5th formal mistake that I made here was not making Spanish-speaking friends, even if it's just digitally, early enough. Again, I say that because I did not start making Spanish-speaking friends, acquaintances, all that kind of stuff until maybe 9 months into the Spanish-speaking journey. Why is this a mistake? Your tutors, your formal teachers, are going to speak to you in a specific way. I'll give you one of the biggest things that I remember, one of the main things that I remember. I always wanted to know how to, when you're asking someone like, hey, does this time work for you? I would always say, esta hora te funciona, which is a literal translation, but nobody really says that. I guess people say it, but from my experience, a lot of people don't say that. What most people say is, esta hora te sirve? Like, does this hour work for you? That's how they say that. But up until I had made Spanish-speaking friends online and in person and in real life here, I didn't know that, because all of the people that were speaking to me from a perspective of teacher, student, tutor, student. So long story short, texting with people making Spanish speaking friends, that really, it seems super simple and subtle and basic, but that has helped my language acquisition a lot, because I've learned how the average person speaks, how to communicate. I've learned texting language, and so again, as early as possible, once you feel comfortable with the language, I would have made an effort to meet people online, make little, become acquaintances with people where, we have a lot of these apps that we can use for language exchanges. I would practice speaking with people, texting people, all that kind of stuff. I would have done that a lot earlier, because it's an indirect way of studying, practicing your writing skills. It's just a useful thing to do, and I just didn't take advantage of that resource early on. Okay, as always, I close these videos. A lot of times when I'm recording these videos, I'm like, is this video really going to help someone? But to close this video, I have 3 other bonus mistakes that I made. The first bonus mistake is that I continuously would tell myself, like, maybe it's time to quit Spanish. Okay, maybe it's time. You're not progressing, and this was after maybe 3 or 4 months. You're not progressing when you listen to a podcast you don't understand, or you thought you had a handle on the language and you just met someone and you didn't understand anything that they were saying. Maybe this isn't for you. Okay, so I would say my next bonus mistake is avoiding negative, it's the mistake that I made is that I was talking to myself with a negative self-talk at times, and so I would say that that's another mistake that I would warn you all not to make. It's very dangerous. It can lead you to want to quit, and so I try to avoid that mistake that I made. Through the journey, there are tough stages. There are times where you feel like, especially if you compare yourself to others, you may feel like, I'm not progressing like I should be, but I would just avoid that at all costs, because again, to me, the achievement at the end is the best. And I'm not at the end, of course, but the fact that I can travel and make friends and meet new people and do everything that I'm doing now with the language, even so much that learning Spanish is about to possibly impact my job, and I'll explain that when it happens, if it happens. That's the point for another day. But yes, that's the other bonus tip, not to talk to yourself with negative self-talk. The other mistake that I waited too late to do is listening to music in Spanish. I don't know why I didn't do that early on, but listening to music has really helped me, especially if you print out the lyrics and go through and try to understand what you're saying. If there's a song that you really like, you're going to want to understand what they're saying, which inherently gives you motivation. And so that's typically the biggest issue, right, for studying, is having the motivation. And so that's typically the biggest issue, is having the motivation. And so that's the other bonus mistake that I made, not listening to music in Spanish early enough, not printing out the lyrics, listening to the music and trying to decode what's being said. And then the last mistake, which is a huge mistake, is I would not have watched Spanish shows with English subtitles. What happens for me, at least, is my brain typically, and I think for a lot of people, because people have commented this on my channel, when there are English subtitles in a video, just subconsciously our brain goes to the subtitles. It goes to something that's familiar. And so I found myself reading the subtitles in English more so than I would be listening to the content in Spanish. And so what I would do is just fight through the annoyance of not understanding what I was listening to, and I would go back and not watch Caso Cerrado y Peppa Pig and all the shows that I was watching, even some of the series that I used to watch, like Narcos and all that. I wouldn't watch those things with subtitles in English. I would just try to fight through and listen to it and try to pick up on what I could in Spanish without the English subtitles. That is it for this video. I do not like super long videos. I've been talking for a very long time. Please ignore the fact that I've been squinting this entire time. I needed the sun so that you all could see me. So hopefully this video helped. As always, if it does, let me know in the comments below. If you have any additional mistakes that you made in the journey, put those down below. We're all helping each other out. I never asked this, but if you all could like the video, I greatly appreciate it. And outside of that, chao pues. Gracias como siempre. The second reason is what's the second reason? What is the second reason? What is the second reason for this? Oh man. Try to communicate.